The sound of my own heartbeat was the loudest thing in the room. It thumped a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. A constant, aching reminder that I was still here. That I had survived the fall. But in that quiet, dimly lit bedroom, survival felt a lot like punishment. My right arm rested in a thick, white cast on a pillow beside me. It felt foreign. Heavy and useless. A clumsy sculpture attached to my shoulder. The doctor had called it a spiral fracture of the humerus. To me, it was just broken. My spirit felt broken too. Friends, before we dive into this story, I want to ask for a small favor. If what you hear resonates with your heart, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Also, let us know in the comments which country you're listening from. It always warms my spirit to see how vast our community is. Happy listening. It was dinner time. I could smell the faint aroma of soup from the kitchen. My daughter Sarah had brought me a bowl. She placed it on the bedside table with a soft clink. She tried to help me sit up, her movements efficient, but distant. There was no warmth in her touch. It was like being adjusted by a careful nurse, not comforted by a daughter. I looked at the bowl. Steam rose from it in gentle curls. It was chicken noodle soup, the kind I used to make for her when she was sick. But now, the sight of it made my stomach clench. With my left hand, I fumbled for the spoon. My fingers, clumsy and uncoordinated, couldn't get a proper grip. The metal spoon felt slippery. It clattered against the rim of the bowl, splashing hot broth onto the wooden table. A wave of frustration washed over me. Hot tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I was a 68-year-old woman, rendered helpless by a simple bowl of soup. I took a deep, shaky breath and tried again. This time, I managed to scoop some broth. But as I lifted the spoon, my hand trembled. The liquid swayed, then spilled down the front of my nightgown. It was warm, then quickly cold and uncomfortable against my skin. I let out a small, defeated sound. A sigh that was almost a sob. That's when Sarah spoke. She had been standing in the doorway, watching my struggle. Her arms were crossed. Her face was not angry. It was something else. Something colder. Resigned. She walked over slowly. She took a napkin and dabbed at the stain on my gown. Her touch was light, but it felt like a brand. And then she whispered it. Her voice was so low, I almost thought I had imagined it. But the words were clear. They cut through the quiet of the room, sharp and final. "My husband taught you a lesson," she whispered. She said it without looking at me. Her eyes were fixed on the wet spot on my nightgown. The world seemed to stop. The thumping of my heart faded away, replaced by a roaring silence. The words echoed in my mind. "My husband taught you a lesson." I looked at my daughter's face. The little girl I had sung to sleep. The teenager I had consoled after her first heartbreak. The woman I thought I knew. In that moment, she was a stranger. And her words, that simple, terrible sentence, held a universe of pain. A story of how our family, once so full of love, had come to this. To a broken arm, a spilled bowl of soup, and a lesson taught in violence. It was in that silence, with a chill of the broth seeping into my skin, that my mind began to drift back to the beginning. Before the anger. Before the quiet resentment. Before Mark, her husband, had become the man who could teach such a brutal lesson. I traveled back to a time when the sun was warmer, and our kitchen was filled with laughter. I went back to the start of it all. My name is Eleanor. But for most of my life, the name I heard most was Mom. Our home was a small, brick-faced house on a quiet, tree-lined street. It wasn't a palace. The floorboards in the hallway creaked a familiar song. The kitchen window looked out over a backyard that was just big enough for a swing set and a small vegetable garden. That garden was my pride and joy. I spent hours there, my hands in the warm soil. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and snap peas. Sarah used to help me when she was little. She would follow me down the rows, her small hands padding the dirt around the seedlings. She had my husband's smile. Wide and open, capable of lighting up the whole yard. My husband, David. He's been gone for 10 years now. A sudden heart attack that left a silence in the house I never quite got used to. He was a quiet man, but his love was loud in the way he fixed a leaky faucet without being asked, or how he always made sure my car had a full tank of gas. He was the steady anchor to my more emotional soul. After he passed, the house felt too big, and the world felt less safe. But I had Sarah. She was my miracle. We had her later in life, after years of hoping. She was the center of our universe. A bright, curious child with a laugh that was like bells. I remember so many nights, sitting on the edge of her bed, reading her stories. She would always pick the longest book, just to keep me there a little longer. Just one more chapter, Mom? Please. How could I ever say no? She grew into a wonderful woman. Smart, with a good heart. She became a teacher, just like I had been. It made me so proud to see her in her own classroom, shaping young minds. We were always close. We talked on the phone almost every day. She would tell me about her students, about the funny things they said. I would tell her about my garden, about the new recipe I was trying. We were a team. Just the two of us against the world. Then she met Mark. I remember the first time she brought him home for dinner. She was so nervous. She fussed over the table setting for an hour. "Be nice, Mom," she said, her voice tight with worry. "I'm always nice," I said, and I meant it. I just wanted her to be happy. Mark was impressive. That's the word that came to mind. He was tall, well-dressed. He had a firm handshake and looked you directly in the eye. He was a financial advisor. He talked about markets and investments with a confidence that was captivating. He seemed to have an answer for everything. That first dinner, he complimented my cooking. "This roast is perfect, Eleanor," he said. "You'll have to give Sarah the recipe." I remember feeling pleased. He was polite. He was successful. He clearly adored my daughter. The way he looked at her, it made my heart feel light. I thought, this is it. She's found her person. She'll be taken care of. After David died, that was my biggest wish for her. To be loved. To be safe. I saw little things, of course. Small moments that I brushed aside. The way he would sometimes correct her stories. Not in a mean way, but in a way that made the story more precise. "It was last Tuesday, sweetheart, not Wednesday," he would say with a gentle smile. Or he would finish her sentences for her. Sarah would just laugh it off. She'd playfully swat his arm. "You know everything, don't you?" I thought it was just a quirk. A sign of how closely he paid attention. They dated for a year before they got engaged. The wedding was beautiful. A small ceremony in a sun-dappled garden. I cried when I saw Sarah in her wedding dress. She looked so much like her father in that moment. The same quiet strength in her eyes. I gave a speech. My voice shook a little. "David would have loved you, Mark," I said, looking at him. "Take care of our girl." He stood up and put his arm around me. "I will, Eleanor. I promise you that." I believed him. With my whole heart, I believed him. The first few years of their marriage seemed happy. They bought a lovely house about 20 minutes from me. I would go over for Sunday dinners. Mark would grill steaks in the backyard. He was always the host, always in charge of the conversation. He liked to talk about their future, their plans, the investments they were making. "We're setting ourselves up for an early retirement, Eleanor," he'd say. "We're going to travel the world." It sounded wonderful. I was happy for them. But slowly, so slowly I hardly noticed at first, the dynamic began to shift. The conversations during our phone calls changed. Sarah started talking less about her students and more about the things Mark wanted. The new car he thought they needed. The vacation home he was researching. "Mark says it's a smart investment," she would tell me. Or, Mark thinks I should cut back on my hours at school once we have children. It was always Mark says, or Mark thinks. Her own voice, her own thoughts, seemed to be getting quieter, fainter. I told myself I was being a worried mother, an overprotective old woman. He was a provider, a planner. That's what good husbands did. They planned for the future. But sometimes, late at night, a small worry would curl up in my stomach. A cold, little knot. I would remember the way David and I had made decisions. We talked about everything. We argued sometimes, yes. But it was always a conversation between two equal partners. With Sarah and Mark, it didn't feel like a conversation. It felt like a plan was being presented. And Sarah was agreeing. I never said anything. What would I say? Your husband is too confident, too successful, too sure of what he wants. It sounded foolish, even to me. So I stayed quiet. I smiled during Sunday dinners. I praised his grilled steaks. I listened to his plans. And I pushed that cold little knot of worry deeper down. This was happiness. This was what I had wanted for her. A beautiful home. A husband who provided. A secure future. It had to be. The change happened so slowly. It was like watching the seasons turn. You don't notice the days getting shorter until suddenly, it's dark at 5 in the afternoon. That's how it was with Mark. I didn't notice the chill until I was already cold. It started about 2 years into their marriage. I had a tradition. Every fall, I would make a big batch of my late husband David's favorite beef stew. It was a whole-day affair. The smell of searing meat and herbs would fill my little house, a warm, comforting scent that felt like a hug. It was my way of remembering him, of keeping a part of him with us. That year, I invited Sarah and Mark over for a Saturday dinner. I was so excited. I had the table set by noon. An hour before they were supposed to arrive, my phone rang. It was Sarah. Her voice was tight. Mom, I'm so sorry. We're not going to be able to make it tonight. My heart sank a little. Oh. Is everything okay? Mark. He had a really long week. He's just exhausted. He says he needs a quiet night at home. You understand, right? I did understand. Of course I did. Everyone gets tired. Of course, sweetheart. Don't you worry about it. There's plenty of stew. I'll freeze some for you. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Mark's voice in the background, a low murmur. Actually, Mom, Sarah said, her words coming out in a rush. Mark says we're trying to eat cleaner. Less red meat, you know? For our health. I looked at the big, bubbling pot on my stove. It represented a day of love, of memory. Oh, I said, my voice small. I see. It's not that we don't appreciate it, she added quickly. It's just a new lifestyle choice. A lifestyle choice. The words felt cold and clinical. They didn't have room for my beef stew, or for the memory of David. That's fine, honey, I managed to say. You take care of him. We hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, the rich, warm smell of the stew suddenly feeling overwhelming. The house was too quiet. The empty chairs at the table seemed to accuse me. That was the first time I felt it. A door, ever so slightly, closing. The missed dinners became more frequent. There was always a reason. Mark had to work late. They had a social event with his colleagues. They were starting a new diet. A detox. A cleanse. Our Sunday dinners shifted from my house to theirs. And when I was at their house, the atmosphere was different. It was Mark's domain. The conversation was dominated by his topics. The stock market. Politics. The right way to do things. One Sunday, I was helping Sarah in the kitchen. She was making a salad. I reached for an onion to chop it. Here, Eleanor, let me show you a better way, Mark said, coming up behind me. He took the knife from my hand. His touch was polite, but firm. You want a finer dice. It releases the flavor more evenly. He quickly and efficiently chopped the onion into perfect, tiny pieces. It was a small thing. He was just trying to help. But it felt like a correction. A silent message that my way, the way I had cooked for my family for 40 years, was not the better way. I looked at Sarah. She was nodding. He's right, Mom. It does taste better that way. I just smiled. I'll have to remember that. Another time, I was talking about maybe getting a small dog. For company. Since the house was so quiet. Oh, I wouldn't recommend that, Eleanor, Mark said, shaking his head. They're a tremendous liability. The vet bills, the damage to property. And they tie you down. Sarah and I like our freedom to travel. He said it so reasonably. So logically. I felt foolish for even suggesting it. My need for companionship was a liability. I started to feel like I had to edit myself around him. My stories became shorter. My opinions stayed inside my head. I was slowly becoming a guest in my daughter's life. A guest who had to follow the rules of the house. The biggest change, however, was in Sarah. The bright, chatty woman she had been began to fade. She became quieter, more reserved. Her laughter was less frequent, and when it did come, it often seemed directed at something Mark had said. Her own sparkle was dimming. Our phone calls, once the highlight of my day, became shorter, more strained. How are you, honey? I'd ask. I'm fine, Mom. Busy. How are things at school? Okay. Mark thinks I might be getting too stressed with it. He's talking about me taking a break. Again. Mark thinks. It was a constant refrain. One afternoon, I went over to their house unexpectedly. I had some extra tomatoes from my garden. I let myself in through the back gate, like I always used to. I found Sarah in the living room. She was on the floor, surrounded by paint swatches. She looked up, and for a split second, I saw a flash of panic on her face before she covered it with a smile. Mom. What a surprise. I brought you some tomatoes, I said, holding out the bag. What's all this? Oh, we're repainting the whole house, she said, getting up and brushing off her knees. Mark decided the current color is too drab. He wants something more vibrant. I looked around the room. I had always loved the soft, warm cream color on the walls. It was Sarah who had picked it out. She had said it felt like sunshine. This looks vibrant to me, I said gently. She gave a little shrug. A helpless gesture. Mark says it's dated. I saw then the stack of paint swatches she had rejected. They were all the soft, warm colors she loved. The ones she was holding were bold, dramatic, grays and deep blues. They were Mark's colors, not hers. I reached out and touched her arm. Sarah, honey, is everything okay? Really? She looked at my hand on her arm, then back at my face. Her eyes were a little glassy. Of course, everything is okay, Mom. Why wouldn't it be? Mark is just. He has a vision for our life. For our home. I'm lucky. She said the word lucky, as if she was trying to convince herself. That was the first time I considered saying something. The words were right there, on the tip of my tongue. Are you happy? Is this the life you wanted? But I didn't. I was afraid. Afraid of causing trouble. Afraid she would get angry and pull away even more. Afraid that I was just a lonely old woman, seeing problems where there were none. So I just squeezed her arm. Well, the tomatoes are from the garden. They're very sweet. The tension came to a head on my 65th birthday. Sarah and Mark offered to host a small party for me at their house. I was touched. I thought maybe this was a turning point. A return to the old ways. I dressed up. I brought a cake from my favorite bakery. When I arrived, the house was spotless. Too spotless. It looked like a magazine spread, not a home ready for a celebration. There were a few other guests. A couple who were Mark's friends, and their wives. The conversation was polite, but it felt formal. Stiff. They talked about investment portfolios and real estate markets. I felt like I was at a business lunch. Then, it was time for gifts. Sarah gave me a beautiful, soft scarf. It was lovely. Then Mark handed me a large, heavy envelope. "Happy birthday, Eleanor," he said, with a confident smile. I opened it. Inside was a binder. A very thick, professional-looking binder. The cover read, Sunset Haven Retirement Community. I was confused. I looked up at him. "It's time to start thinking about the future, Eleanor," Mark said, his voice booming in the quiet room. "Your house is too big for you. The stairs are a falling hazard. The yard is too much work. Sunset Haven is the best. It's a complete life care facility. We've done all the research." I felt the air leave my lungs. A retirement community? A facility? My house. My home with David. The garden. It was my whole life. It was all I had left. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at her plate, her face pale. "Mark, this is a surprise," I stammered. I haven't thought about moving." "That's the point," he said, as if talking to a child. "You don't have to think about it. We've thought it through for you. It's all settled. We can list your house next month. The market is hot right now. It's the perfect time. The perfect time to sell my life." I felt a hot flush of humiliation and anger, but mostly a deep, profound hurt. He had done this in front of strangers. He had presented the end of my independence as a birthday gift. I looked at Sarah, silently begging her to say something, to stand up for me, to say, "Mom, you don't have to do anything you don't want to." But she stayed silent. She just kept looking at her plate. The rest of the party was a blur. I think I smiled. I think I thanked them. I felt like I was outside of my own body, watching this happen to someone else. When I got home that night, I sat in my dark kitchen and I cried. I cried for David. I cried for my daughter, who had sat in silence. I cried for my home, which someone was already planning to sell out from under me. That was the true breaking point. The moment the slow, rising conflict broke through the surface. The next day, I finally found my voice. I called Sarah. "Sarah," I said, my voice trembling. "We need to talk about last night." There was a long silence on the other end. Then she said, "I know, Mom. I'm sorry it upset you. But Mark is right. We're just worried about you. All alone in that big house. Alone." I said, my voice breaking. "This house is full of memories. It's full of your father. It's full of you." "Memories don't keep you safe, Mom," she said, her voice soft but firm. It didn't sound like her voice. It sounded like his words, coming from her mouth. "We're doing this because we love you." That was the first time I ever hung up on my daughter. I sat there, the phone clutched in my hand, shaking. I had crossed a line. I had shown my anger. And I was terrified of what would happen next. The silence that followed was colder than any I had ever known. The phone didn't ring for days. The small, cold knot of worry in my stomach had grown. It was now a solid block of ice. The door wasn't just closed now. It felt locked. And I was on the wrong side of it. The silence after my birthday lasted for 2 weeks. It was the longest we had ever gone without speaking. Each day felt heavy, empty. My phone, which used to be a lifeline, sat silent on the table. It felt like a betrayal. Not just from Sarah, but from me. I had hung up on my own daughter. The guilt ate at me, even as the anger simmered. I missed her so much it was a physical ache. I would pick up the phone to call her a dozen times a day, but my fingers would freeze. What would I say? I couldn't apologize for wanting to stay in my own home. And I was too proud and too hurt to be the first to break. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. The loneliness was worse than any argument. I decided to go over there. Unannounced. Maybe without Mark around, we could talk. Really talk. Like we used to. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I knew Mark would be at work. I baked a lemon loaf, Sarah's favorite. It was a peace offering. A white flag held in a trembling hand. I parked my car on the street outside their house. My heart was pounding. I walked up the path to the front door, the loaf tin feeling heavy in my hands. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. I heard footsteps. The door opened. It was Sarah. She looked tired. She had on an old sweatshirt, one I recognized from years ago. For a moment, seeing her like that, it felt like old times. "Mom," she said. Her voice was flat. Surprised, but not happy to see me. "I brought you a lemon loaf," I said, holding it out like a shield. She hesitated, then stepped back to let me in. "Come in." The house was quiet. The new, bold gray paint on the walls felt cold. Oppressive. We went into the kitchen. She put the kettle on for tea without asking if I wanted any. It was a small thing, but it felt like another door closing. We sat at the kitchen island. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. "How have you been?" I finally asked. "Fine," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Busy." "Sarah," I said, my voice soft. "I'm sorry about hanging up. I was just so hurt." She looked up then. Her eyes were sad. "I know, Mom. But you have to understand. Mark is just trying to take care of you. Of us. He carries the weight of everything. Our future. Your future. It's a lot of pressure." The words were so rehearsed. They sounded like a speech she had given herself in the mirror. "I don't need him to carry my future, honey," I said gently. "I can carry my own. I have been for 10 years. My house. It's not just a building. It's my home. It's where I feel close to your father. The idea of selling it. It feels like losing him all over again." "Mom, that's not healthy," she said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Living in the past. Clinging to a house. You need to think about your safety. Your quality of life. Sunset Haven has a pool. And activities. Activities." I said, and I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "I have a garden. That's my activity. I have a life. Right where I am." "It's not a life, Mom. It's existing," she said, her voice rising. "You're alone all the time. You're stuck in your routines. Mark is offering you a chance to be social. To be safe. I am not a child, Sarah," I said, my own voice rising to match hers. The frustration of months of years was bubbling over. "I don't need to be managed. I don't need his solutions. I need my daughter to see me. To hear me. Not to just parrot what her husband says." The moment the words were out, I regretted them. They were too harsh. They hung in the air between us, sharp and ugly. Sarah's face went white. Then it flushed red with anger. "Don't you dare," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't you dare talk about him like that. You have no idea what he does for us. For me. He has given me everything. A beautiful home. A secure future. A plan. While you just clung to a ghost in a crumbling old house." It was like she had slapped me. "A ghost," I said, my voice breaking. "That ghost was your father. The man who loved you more than anything. And he's gone," she shouted, tears now streaming down her face. "He's gone, and you're still living in his shadow. And you want me to live there with you? Well, I won't. I have a real life now. With a real man who is here. Who provides. Who protects me. Protects you from what?" I cried, standing up. "From me. From your own mother." The argument was spiraling. We were both saying things we could never take back. We were in a place we had never been before. A place of pure, raw hurt. And that's when we heard it. The front door opened. We both froze. The sound of Mark's briefcase being set down in the hallway was like a gunshot. His footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was still in his suit. He looked from Sarah's tear-streaked face to my distraught one. His expression was calm. Too calm. It was the stillness of deep water. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice even. "Nothing, Mark," Sarah said quickly, wiping her tears away. "Mom just stopped by for a visit." "It didn't sound like nothing," he said, his eyes fixed on me. They were cold. "It sounded like you were upsetting my wife, Eleanor." The way he said, "my wife," was a claim. A boundary. She was his. Not mine. "I think you should leave," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Something in me snapped. The fear, the deference I had always shown him, evaporated in the heat of my pain. "No," I said. The word came out quiet, but firm. He raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." I said no, I repeated, standing my ground. "I am not leaving until I finish talking to my daughter." "This is my house," he said, taking a step forward. "You will leave when I tell you to leave. You come into my home, you upset my wife, and you think you can make the rules. Your home." I shot back. This was her home, too. Before you decided to repaint all her choices off the walls. "Mom, stop it," Sarah pleaded, but it was too late. Mark took another step towards me. He was a big man. He loomed over me. The friendly, confident mask was gone. What was underneath was hard. Implacable. "You have been a poison in this family for long enough, Eleanor," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "With your guilt trips and your nostalgia. You can't let her be happy. You can't let her move on. Because you're stuck. Well, I'm not going to let you drag her down with you." His words were like knives. Each one found its mark. "That is not true," I whispered, my whole body trembling. "It is true," he said. "And it ends now. You are going to sell that house. You are going to move to Sunset Haven. And you are going to stop interfering in our marriage." "I will do no such thing," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of terror and defiance. He moved so fast. One moment he was in front of me, the next he had grabbed my upper arm. His grip was like iron. It hurt. "Let go of me," I said, trying to pull away. "Mark, don't," Sarah cried out. He ignored her. He started pulling me towards the front door. "I am showing you out." I panicked. I dug my heels in. I twisted, trying to break his grip. "Let me go." We were in the hallway now, near the stairs that led to the front door. I was fighting him, a desperate, foolish struggle. He was so much stronger. "Enough," he growled. He gave me a hard, sharp shove towards the door. It wasn't meant to hurt me, I don't think. It was meant to assert control. To move me. But I was off balance. My heel caught on the edge of the beautiful, expensive runner rug he had chosen. Time seemed to slow down. I felt my feet go out from under me. There was a sensation of flying, then falling. The world tilted. I saw the sharp, polished edge of the bottom stair. I threw my arm out to break my fall. There was a sound. A sickening, dry crack. It was loud in the quiet hallway. Then, the pain. A white-hot, searing pain that shot from my arm through my entire body. It took my breath away. I lay on the floor at the bottom of the stairs, curled around my arm, gasping. The world swam in and out of focus. I heard Sarah scream. "Mom!" I saw Mark's face above me. The anger was gone, replaced by a shocked, pale stillness. He looked at his own hands, as if he didn't recognize them. The pain was so intense I thought I might be sick. But worse than the pain was the silence that followed. The terrible, knowing silence. He had meant to push me out. He had not meant for me to fall. But he had. And my arm was broken. In the haze of pain, I heard him speak. His voice was quiet, controlled again. A mask slipping back into place. "Eleanor," he said. "You fell. You were hysterical, and you lost your balance and fell." I looked at him, my eyes wide with pain and disbelief. He looked at Sarah, who was kneeling beside me, sobbing. "Sarah," he said, his voice firm. "Your mother was very upset. She was not watching her step. She fell. It wasn't a question. It was an instruction." I looked at my daughter. Her face was a mess of tears and confusion. She looked from my twisted arm to Mark's stern face. And in that moment, in the most painful moment of my life, I saw her make a choice. She looked down at me, her sobs quieting. She took a shaky breath. "Mom," she whispered, her voice hollow. You fell." And with those words, something in me broke that was far more fragile than any bone. It was my heart. It was my hope. It was the last thread connecting me to my daughter. The rest was a blur. The ambulance. The paramedics. The ride to the hospital. Sarah came in the ambulance with me. She held my good hand. But she wouldn't look me in the eye. Mark followed in his car. He spoke to the doctors. He was the concerned son-in-law. He explained how I had become agitated, how I had tripped on the rug. He was so believable. I lay in the hospital bed, my arms set and cast, floating on a cloud of pain medication. But no medication could dull the other pain. The memory of the crack. The look on Mark's face. The sound of Sarah's voice, agreeing with him. "You fell." They brought me home that night. Mark carried my things into the house. Sarah helped me into bed. She was efficient. Quiet. She went to make me soup. And that's when she whispered it. Standing over me, dabbing the spilled broth from my gown. "My husband taught you a lesson." It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. A cold, hard truth that had settled in her heart. She had chosen his reality over mine. She was living in his world now, a world where I was a hysterical old woman who fell, and he was the man who taught necessary lessons. The turning point was not the fall. It was not the broken arm. The turning point was her whisper. That was the moment everything truly shattered. The days that followed my return from the hospital blurred into one long, grey stretch of time. The world had shrunk to the four walls of my bedroom. The cast on my arm was a constant, heavy reminder. It was more than a plaster shell for a broken bone. It was a monument to the break in my family. Sarah came every day. She would bring groceries, prepare meals, and help me with the tasks I could no longer manage. But she was a ghost of herself. A beautiful, efficient ghost. Our conversations were functional, stripped of all the warmth that used to flow so easily between us. "Did you take your pain medication, Mom?" "I've left a casserole in the fridge for your dinner. The physical therapist will be here at 2 o'clock tomorrow." She would say these things while looking just past my shoulder, never directly into my eyes. It was as if eye contact would make the situation too real. It would force her to acknowledge the unspoken truth that hung in the air between us, thicker than the smell of antiseptic from the hospital. I tried, once. A few days after the fall, as she was fluffing my pillows, I reached out with my good hand and touched her wrist. "Sarah," I said, my voice raspy. "We need to talk about what really happened." She froze. Her whole body went stiff. She gently but firmly pulled her wrist away. "The doctor said you need to rest, Mom," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "You shouldn't get yourself worked up. It was a terrible accident. A fall. Let's just focus on you getting better." A fall. The word was like a wall she kept building between us, brick by brick. I saw the fear in her eyes. The fear of confronting Mark. The fear of dismantling the life she had built with him. The story of the fall was the foundation of that life now. To question it was to risk everything collapsing. And she was not ready for that. She had chosen her safety, her secure future, over the messy, complicated truth. So I stopped trying. Arguing with her was like arguing with a recorded message. It was Mark's voice, Mark's logic, coming from her mouth. The daughter I knew was buried deep inside, and I had no idea how to reach her. The loneliness was a physical weight on my chest. It was worse than the ache in my arm. I missed David with a fresh, sharp intensity. I would talk to him sometimes, in the quiet of the room. "What do I do, David?" I would whisper into the silence. "How do I get our girl back?" There was no answer, of course. Just the faint creak of the house settling, a sound that used to comfort me but now just emphasized the emptiness. The physical therapist, a kind woman named Linda, became my tether to the outside world. She came twice a week to help me regain movement in my arm. The exercises were painful. They involved slow, deliberate movements that made the muscles scream in protest. "Breathe through it, Eleanor," Linda would say in her calm, steady voice. "You're doing great. Just a little further." One day, after a particularly difficult session, I was sitting in my armchair, exhausted and tearful. Linda was packing her equipment. "It's not just the arm, is it?" she asked softly, without looking at me. I was so startled by her perception that the truth tumbled out. "My daughter. She thinks her husband taught me a lesson." Linda paused. She didn't seem shocked. She just nodded slowly. "I see a lot of people in their homes," she said. "You learn to see the other kinds of breaks. The ones that don't show up on an X-ray." Her simple empathy was like a crack in the dam holding back my emotions. I didn't tell her the whole story, but I didn't have to. She saw the pain. And in that moment, I felt a little less alone. The days turned into weeks. The sharp, stabbing pain in my arm dulled into a constant, deep ache. My life settled into a new, quiet routine. I learned to do many things left-handed. My handwriting became a clumsy scrawl. Cooking was a slow, frustrating process of chopping and stirring with one hand. But with each small victory, buttering a piece of toast, tying my shoes in a clumsy knot, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Self-reliance. I was starting to realize that I could survive this. Not just the broken arm, but the broken heart. I could survive the silence. One afternoon, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't Sarah's usual time. My heart leapt with a foolish hope. Maybe she had come to talk. Really talk. I opened the door. It was Mark. He stood on my porch, looking as polished and out of place as always. He held a large manila envelope. "Eleanor," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "May I come in?" My first instinct was to slam the door. But a strange calm settled over me. I was in my own home. My territory. I stepped back and let him in. He walked into the living room, his eyes taking in the room. I saw him notice the small messes, the book left open on the armchair, the blanket folded haphazardly on the sofa. I didn't apologize for them. "I won't take much of your time," he said, placing the envelope on the coffee table. "These are the finalized plans and financial projections for Sunset Haven. I've spoken with the director. There's a unit becoming available in 3 months. It's perfect timing for your recovery." I didn't touch the envelope. I just looked at him. I looked at the man who had broken my arm and broken my family, and who was now standing in my living room, talking about timelines as if he were planning a business merger. I felt the old fear rise in my throat. The desire to placate him, to avoid another confrontation. But then I thought of the slow, painful progress with my physical therapist. The strength I was finding, one clumsy left-handed task at a time. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it filled the room. He blinked. "I'm sorry." I said no, Mark, I repeated, my voice stronger now. "I am not moving to Sunset Haven. I am not selling my house. This is my home. I am staying here." He stared at me, his composure cracking for just a second. I saw a flash of the anger I had seen in his hallway. "This is irrational," Eleanor. You can't possibly manage here alone. Look at what just happened. What happened, Mark? I said, looking directly into his eyes. Was that you pushed me? And I fell. There. I had said it. Out loud. In the quiet of my own living room. His face tightened. We've been over this. It was an accident. You were hysterical. I was a mother fighting for her daughter, I said, my voice trembling but clear. And you were a man who used his strength to silence her. You can call it a fall. Sarah can call it a fall. But you and I both know what it was. He took a step towards me, and for a moment, I was afraid again. But I stood my ground. Get out of my house, Mark, I said. He looked stunned. He had never heard me speak to him like that. With authority. With finality. This isn't over, he said, his voice low. It is for today, I said. I walked to the front door and held it open. You can tell Sarah she doesn't need to come by tomorrow. I can manage on my own. He picked up the envelope from the coffee table. He walked to the door, pausing on the threshold. He looked at me, and I saw something new in his eyes. It wasn't respect. But it was a recognition. A recognition that I was no longer the pliable, grieving mother-in-law he could manage. I was a force he had to contend with. He left without another word. I closed the door and leaned against it, my whole body shaking. I had done it. I had stood up to him. In that moment, I felt a surge of strength that had nothing to do with my physical body. It was the strength of truth. The next day, Sarah did not come. The house was silent. I made myself a pot of tea, left-handed. It took a long time, and I spilled some, but I did it. I sat at my kitchen table, in the sunshine, and I drank my tea. And for the first time since the fall, I did not feel entirely lonely. I felt like I had myself for company. And that was enough. A week passed. Then another. The silence from Sarah was a deep, profound ache. But it was a clean ache. It wasn't filled with the tension of her strained visits. It was just silence. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened the door. It was Sarah. She was standing in the rain, without an umbrella. Her hair was plastered to her head, and her clothes were soaked. She was crying. Not the quiet tears from before, but deep, body-racking sobs. "Mom," she choked out. I didn't say a word. I simply opened my arms. She fell into them, sobbing against my shoulder, her wet hair soaking my blouse. I held her, my good arm wrapped tightly around her, my cast resting gently on her back. We stood like that in the doorway for a long time, as the rain fell around us. Finally, I led her inside. I sat her down at the kitchen table and wrapped a dry blanket around her shoulders. I made her a cup of sweet tea, the way I used to when she was a little girl and had a nightmare. She held the mug with both hands, her knuckles white. She wouldn't look at me. He did the same thing, she whispered, her voice raw. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, honey? He was angry about a work project, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I said something. I disagreed with him. I told him I didn't think we should invest in something. It was the first time I had really disagreed with him in so long. She took a shaky sip of tea. He didn't like it. He got that look. The same look he had with you. He grabbed my arm. Right here. She pointed to her upper arm, where a faint, purplish bruise was just beginning to show. He didn't mean to, he said afterwards. He was just frustrated. He said I was being irrational. That I didn't understand the pressure he was under. She started sobbing again. And I believed him, Mom. I believed him when he said it was my fault. Just like I believed him about your fall. But when he grabbed me, I saw it. I saw it all. I saw you falling. I saw the look on his face. Not regret. Just coldness. And I knew. I knew what he had done to you. And I knew what I had done. I had chosen him. I had let him call you a liar. I had become a liar myself. The dam had broken. The truth, held back for so long, flooded out. She told me everything. The slow, insidious control. The way he criticized her friends, until she stopped seeing them. The way he managed her money, so she had to ask him for everything. The way he made her feel foolish for her own thoughts, her own dreams. The lesson he taught me wasn't just for me. It was for her, too. It was a demonstration of his power. A warning of what happened to those who defied him. And she had accepted it. Until the lesson was turned on her. We talked for hours. We cried. We held each other. There were no "I told you so's" from me. There was only heartbreak, and a fierce, protective love. My daughter had come back to me. Bruised, broken, and full of regret, but she was back. She didn't go home that night. She stayed in her old room. The room that still had the soft, cream-colored walls she had chosen as a teenager. The next morning, over breakfast, she looked at me, her eyes clear for the first time in years. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said. "For everything." "I know, baby," I said, taking her hand. "I know." The road to healing, for both of us, was just beginning. My arm was still in a cast. Her marriage was in ruins. But we were together. And we were facing the truth. And in that truth, as painful as it was, we found our way back to each other. The morning after Sarah came back, the world felt both lighter and heavier. The heavy truth was now out in the open, a presence at our kitchen table. But the terrible, suffocating silence was gone. In its place was a raw, honest pain that we could finally face together. We sat with our tea, the steam rising between us. The initial storm of tears had passed, leaving behind a landscape of wreckage that we had to survey. "What do you want to do, Sarah?" I asked, my voice gentle. It was the most important question. For years, her wants had been buried under Mark's plans. She stared into her mug, her fingers tracing its rim. "I don't know," she whispered. "I'm so tired. I feel like I've been holding my breath for years." "Then just breathe for now," I said. "There's no rush. You are safe here. This is your home too." It was a simple statement, but it made her cry again. Quiet, cleansing tears this time. She had been living in a house that was never truly hers, and she had forgotten what a home felt like. The first practical step was dealing with Mark. His calls started around 9 o'clock. Sarah's phone buzzed on the table, his name flashing on the screen. She looked at it with a mixture of fear and guilt. "Don't answer it," I said. "Not until you know what you want to say." She nodded, her jaw set with a determination I hadn't seen in a long time. She let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, my home phone rang. We both looked at it. "I'll get it," I said. I needed to be the buffer. I picked up the phone. "Hello, Mark." "Eleanor." His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the anger simmering beneath. "Is Sarah there?" "She's not answering her cell. She didn't come home last night." "I'm worried." He was using the script of the concerned husband. It was a performance, and we both knew it. "She's here," I said, my voice calm and even. "She's safe. Put her on the phone, please." It was not a request. "She's resting right now," I said. "She'll call you when she's ready to talk." There was a long silence on the other end. I could almost feel his fury through the line. "Ready to talk? Eleanor, what is this about? Is this about her mother filling her head with nonsense again?" I took a slow breath. I would not be drawn into a fight. I would not be the hysterical mother-in-law. "This is about Sarah," I said simply. "And what she needs. She will contact you. Do not come to this house." I hung up before he could respond. My hand was trembling. It felt like another small act of defiance. Sarah was watching me, her eyes wide. "What did he say?" "He's playing his part," I said. But we don't have to play ours anymore. Over the next few days, we fell into a new, fragile routine. It was like caring for a convalescent. Sarah was recovering from a different kind of break. Her spirit was bruised, her confidence shattered. Small decisions paralyzed her. What to make for lunch? What movie to watch? She would look at me, her eyes asking for permission, for guidance, just as she had with Mark. Whatever you'd like, honey, I would say. There is no wrong answer. It was heartbreaking to see. The vibrant, opinionated woman she had been was hidden under layers of self-doubt. We started small. I had her choose the vegetables at the grocery store. I asked her to pick the music we listened to. At first, she would second-guess every choice. Is this okay? Do you like this song? Slowly, very slowly, she began to remember the sound of her own voice. We talked for hours. Not just about Mark, but about everything. About her father. About her childhood. About her dreams of being a teacher, before they got folded into Mark's vision for their life. She confessed that he had been pressuring her to quit for over a year. He said my salary was insignificant compared to his potential, she said, her voice laced with a fresh pain. He said I was wasting my energy on other people's children. I listened. I didn't offer much advice. I just let her talk. The stories tumbled out, each one a piece of the puzzle, showing the systematic erosion of the person she was. A week after she arrived, she decided she was ready to talk to Mark. She asked me to be in the room with her, and I agreed. She put the phone on speaker. Sarah. His voice came through, smooth and concerned. Finally. I've been so worried. When are you coming home? We need to talk about this. I am home, Mark, Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady. Don't be dramatic. Your home is here with me. This little tantrum has gone on long enough. It's not a tantrum. She took a deep breath. I saw the bruise on my arm, Mark. I remember you grabbing me. And I remember you pushing my mother. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then, the mask slipped completely. You are rewriting history, Sarah. You are listening to a bitter, lonely old woman who is jealous of our life. You fell apart over a simple disagreement, and now you're blaming me? After everything I've given you? The house. The cars. The security. It was the same script, but now Sarah was reading from a different one. You gave me things, Mark, she said, her voice growing stronger. But you took away me. I don't want your things anymore. I want a divorce. The word hung in the air, final and terrifying. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold and flat. You will regret this, Sarah. You have no idea what you're throwing away. You'll be nothing without me. I was already nothing with you, she whispered, and ended the call. She looked at me, her entire body shaking. I said it. You were magnificent, I said, and I meant it. The legal process was daunting. Mark, true to his nature, fought it with cold, financial precision. He used every tactic to intimidate her, to drag out the proceedings, to make her feel small. But something had shifted in Sarah. The more he fought, the more she realized the truth of what she had escaped. She was no longer the woman who would agree to his plans. She found a lawyer, a fierce woman who specialized in these kinds of cases, and together they stood their ground. During this time, my own healing continued. The cast finally came off. My arm was thin and weak, the skin pale and sensitive. The physical therapist, Linda, continued her work. The exercises were still painful, but now they felt purposeful. Every bit of strength I regained in that arm felt like a metaphor. I was reclaiming my own strength, piece by piece. One sunny afternoon, Sarah and I were in my backyard. I was slowly, carefully, weeding my garden with a trowel in my left hand. My right arm was still too weak for the task. Sarah watched me for a while, then she knelt down in the dirt beside me. Show me, she said. I showed her how to loosen the soil around the weeds, how to pull them out by the root so they wouldn't grow back. She worked silently beside me, her hands, which had become so accustomed to manicures and fine things, getting dirty in the rich, dark soil. It felt like a ceremony, a reclaiming. We were weeding our own lives, pulling out the poisonous things by the root, so something new and healthy could grow. As the months passed, the sharp edges of the pain began to soften. The divorce was finalized. It was not a victory in the traditional sense. There were no winners, but it was a resolution. A chance to start over. Sarah found a small apartment not far from me. She didn't want a house, not yet. She wanted a space that was entirely her own, with walls she could paint any color she liked. She went back to teaching, and I saw the light come back into her eyes when she talked about her students. She was rebuilding her life, not as Mark's wife, but as Sarah. Just Sarah. Our relationship was different now. Deeper. It had been tested in fire and had emerged, not unscarred, but stronger. We had seen each other at our most broken, and we had helped each other mend. One evening, we were sitting on my porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said softly, for what felt like the 100th time. "I'm sorry for what I said. For what I let happen." I looked at her. The fading light caught the familiar features of her face, the face I had loved from the moment I first saw it. "I know," I said. "And I forgive you. But Sarah, I need you to forgive yourself." Tears filled her eyes. "How?" "By living your life," I said. "By being happy. That's the only lesson that ever mattered." She leaned her head on my good shoulder, and we sat there in the quiet, watching the day end. The past was a shadow behind us. The future was still unknown. But in that moment, on that porch, we had everything we needed. We had the truth. We had each other. And we had a hard-won peace that felt more valuable than any plan, any house, any lesson taught in anger. Time has a way of softening the sharpest edges of memory. The searing white pain of my broken arm is now a faint, occasional ache when the weather turns damp. A reminder, but not a torment. My garden has flourished. This year, the tomatoes are especially sweet. I eat them straight from the vine, the warm juice tasting like summer itself. Sarah's apartment is a reflection of her now. The walls are a soft, buttery yellow. Her books are piled on tables, bookmarked in different places. There are photos everywhere, of her students, of US, of her father. It is a home filled with life, with her life. She didn't just pick the color of the walls, she filled them with her spirit. We still have our Sunday dinners. But now, they are at my house, or hers, or sometimes we pack a picnic and go to the park. The conversation is easy. We talk about her work, about my garden, about a book we're both reading. There is no one to correct us, no one to steer the conversation toward a better topic. We simply talk. And the sound of our laughter, real and unforced, is the most beautiful music I know. I was cleaning out the attic the other day, something I'd been putting off for years. I found an old cardboard box, dusty and forgotten. Inside were some of Sarah's childhood things. Her old report cards, a dried corsage from her high school prom, and at the bottom, a stack of drawings. I sat on the dusty floorboards and sifted through them. There were crayon drawings of our family, 3 stick figures with giant smiles, standing under a lopsided sun. There was a painting of our house, the chimney pouring out a curl of purple smoke. And then I found one that made me stop. It was a drawing of me. In it, I was wearing a flowery dress and holding her hand. She had written at the top in her wobbly childhood script, "My mom is strong." I held that piece of paper in my hands, and I cried. Not tears of sadness, but of a profound, overwhelming gratitude. The little girl who saw strength in me then, she had found her way back to that truth. And the mother in the drawing, she had found her way back, too. I realize now that the story wasn't really about a broken arm. It wasn't even about Mark, not really. It was about love. And how love can get lost, twisted by control and fear. It can be used as a weapon, or as an excuse for silence. But true love, the real kind, is a force that endures. It waits in the quiet spaces. It survives the long, cold silences. And when given a chance, it finds its way home. The lesson wasn't the one Mark thought he was teaching. The real lesson was about forgiveness. Not the kind that excuses hurtful actions, but the kind that sets you free from them. I had to forgive Sarah for her silence, for her choice. And more importantly, she had to learn to forgive herself. That has been the longest, and most important, healing of all. And me. I had to forgive myself, too. For my own silence in the beginning. For the times I saw the small signs and looked away because I wanted her to be happy. I've learned that love sometimes requires a brave voice, not just a quiet heart. Now, when I look at my daughter, I don't see a victim. I see a survivor. I see a woman of immense courage who walked away from a gilded cage and chose to build her own life, from the ground up. She is more herself now than she has been in years. And that is the greatest gift I could ever receive. The other evening, she was over for dinner. We were washing the dishes together, me washing, her drying. The last of the sunset was streaming through the window, painting the kitchen in gold. She bumped my shoulder with hers, a playful, familiar gesture. "I love you, Mom." I looked at her, her face relaxed and happy in the soft light. The memory of her whisper in my dark bedroom felt like a story from another lifetime. "I love you too, my Sarah," I said. "More than you will ever know." We finished the dishes in a comfortable silence. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet. A peaceful quiet. It was filled not with absence, but with presence. Our presence. A mother and a daughter, two women who had been through a storm and had found their way to solid ground. The past is a part of us, it's true. The scars, both visible and invisible, remain. But they are not wounds anymore. They are reminders of our strength. They are proof that we can break, and we can mend. We can fall, and we can rise. And we can learn, after everything, how to be whole again. Thanks for listening. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.